tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Continuing our reading of this Buddhist thought in India, we just came across the mention of the importance of inward tranquility or samatha. Continuing, many of our contemporaries, imprisoned in what they describe as common sense, quite gratuitously assume as self-evident that all the contents of mental life are derived from contact with external sense data. I hope we understand. Means all our contemporaries, our friends in the environment, they think that whatever is happening in our minds as mental activity is happening because of the contact of the senses with the sense objects. They think that. They are therefore convinced that the radical withdrawal from those sense data can but lead to some kind of vague vacuity almost indistinguishable from sleep or coma. So the derived conclusion is that by prolonged inward withdrawal from these sense data, there will be vacuity in the brain, in the mind, and it is going to be no different from sleep or coma. That is what is the common man's thinking, because they think all the mental activity is based on the sense data. More than common sense is needed to discover that it leads to a state which the Indian yogins, who under the influence of Sanskrit grammar were almost obsessed with a desire for terminological precision, called one of tranquility. So for the same state that we reach, inward tranquility, instead of calling it as a vacuity or what do you say, vacuity, or like a sleep or a coma, the yogis, who obviously were using Sanskrit which provides for a more precision in terms of expressing the experience, they were calling it as not as vacuity but as tranquility. Like we said, we used the word earlier, tranquility, calming or quietening, or samatha, tranquility, which is full of ease, bliss and happiness. That state is one of tranquility, is full of ease with bliss and happiness. These are the four words that the author mentions here to reflect the meaning of what Sanskrit words were used by the yogis to express the state which they reach when all the sense data is withdrawn. Likewise, a Bornean Dayak must find it difficult to believe that hard black coal can be changed into bright light within an electric bulb. So because there is a transformation happening, and a Bornean Dayak, probably is an uninformed person, might think that way. There is ultimately only one way open to those who do not believe the accounts of the yogins. There is ultimately only one way to open those who do not believe the accounts of the yogins. They will have to repeat the experiment in the forest, not the laboratory. They will have to do what the yogins say should be done and see what happens. The only way to know is to do those exercises which the yogins have said and then see what happens. There is no other way, and this cannot be done in a laboratory, but it should be done in a forest, in a secluded environment, because it has been prescribed that there is a lifestyle which is required as a prerequisite to be living alone with the least possessions, etc. Until this is done, disbelief is quite idle. And on a level with a pygmy's disbelief in Battersea power station, maintained by a stubborn refusal to leave the Congo basin and to see for himself whether it exists and what it does. So obviously the explanation is to say that unless you leave where you are and go to the new land to see its features, you cannot speculate simply. Until then, it becomes an idle, quite an idle affair. In other words, it seems to me quite unworthy of educated people to deny that there exists a series of technical practices known as yoga, which, if applied intelligently according to the rules, produces a state of tranquility. So without doing those practices, which are declared to be producing tranquility, if somebody denies, it's not really good of the so-called educated people to denounce without really studying the other side. So much about the technical substructure. The ideological superstructure in its turn consists of a number of theoretical systems by no means always consonant with each other. This is about the technical structure. Now the ideological structure consists of many theories, and sometimes those theories may not be 100% in consonance with each other. Theologically, they are Hindu, Buddhist or Jaina. Some are atheistic, some polytheistic, others again henotheistic. Philosophically, some like Vaiseshika and Abhidharma are pluralistic. Others like Vedanta and Madhyamikas monistic. So here he is depicting the divergence of thought that is available in the Eastern philosophy. He is bringing out both Buddhism, Hinduism and Jaina to say that there are theistic, atheistic, polytheistic, monotheistic and things like that. These two monistic systems again seem to be diametrically opposed in their most fundamental tenets. The two monotheistic systems of Mahayana and Vedanta seem to be opposed to each other in their most fundamental tenets. The one claiming that the self, Atman, is the only reality. That is the Vedanta. The other, that it is just the absence of a self, Nairatmya, which distinguishes true reality from false appearance. The other, that it is just the absence of self which distinguishes true reality from false appearance. So here the word self is used, and in the text, in the case of Vedanta Atma, he uses a capital S, and in the case of Buddhist Mahayana, he uses the word self in a small s, S-E-L-F, and Nairatmya, which distinguishes true reality from false appearance. Okay, so if there is so what he means is there is an appearance of a self which is false appearance, and if Nairatmya is the true nature, that's what it means to say. On closer study, these disagreements do, however, turn out to be fairly superficial. All these yogic philosophies differ less among themselves than they differ from the non-yogic ones. So the yogic philosophies, though they may appear to be differing in the way just now we saw between Mahayana and the Vedanta, they are not really different if you careful observation, and they do significantly differ from the non-yogic approaches. They not only agree that yogic practices are valid, but in addition postulate that these practices are the avenues to the most worthwhile knowledge of true reality, as well as a basis for the most praiseworthy conduct, and that as the source of ultimate certainty, the yogic vision itself requires no justifications. So, all the yogic systems agree that yogic practices are valid, but in addition postulate that these practices are the avenues to the most worthwhile knowledge of true reality. By these practices, one comes to know the true reality, as well as a basis for the most praiseworthy conduct. Means the yogic practices which embed within themselves certain lifestyle is a praiseworthy conduct in the society conduct, and that as the source of ultimate certainty, the yogic vision itself requires no justification. So the vision that dawns through these practices does not require any other justification, because one directly comes to know what it is. And it gives ultimate certainty. Only in a sense of yogic receptivity are we fit and able to become the recipients of ultimate truth. Only in a state of yogic receptivity are we fit and able to become the recipients of ultimate truth. So I repeated it because we are talking about here yogic receptivity. Yogic receptivity is needed. Receptivity which is yogic. So we'll see how this receptivity qualified by yogic can mean something which is more tangible, significant as we go by. Observations made in any other condition concern an illusory world, largely false and fabricated, which cannot provide a standard for judging the deliverances of the yogic consciousness. So as I said here, in a state of yogic receptivity are we fit and able to become the recipients of ultimate truth. When somebody has achieved a certain state of yogic receptivity, then they are able to receive or recognize the revelations of the true reality, of the ultimate truth. Observations made in any other condition, which are not yogic states, which is not a state of yogic receptivity or samadhi, for example, then in any other made in any other concern an illusory world. Any other observation made, like we are doing now, not being in a yogic state, is observation of an illusory world. Means what is perceived by us as a world is not real, it is illusory. Whatever that English word illusory may mean to you, it means unreal. It means unreal, basically. So how it is unreal, that is what needs to be understood by knowing what is it that we call as unreal or illusory. As we go by in the next few chapters, we will know. And in contrast to that, what is that yogic state going to give real? Largely false and fabricated. So largely false and fabricated. The perceptions that we have is all largely false and fabricated, which cannot provide a standard for judging the deliverances of the yogic consciousness. So being in a yogic consciousness, the deliverance, the freedom, ease, the liberation, that is the domain of the yogi, is not what is available to us in this falsely fabricated worldly experience. So only those which are in the so these false experiences cannot provide a measure to see the freedom that is experienced in a yogic consciousness. A closely analogous situation prevails in Western Europe with regard to science. In this field also, we can distinguish between the technology itself and its theoretical developments. The prestige of the scientific approach among our modern philosophers seems to me entirely due to its applications. If a philosopher assures us that all the real knowledge we possess is due to science, that science alone gives us news about the universe, then what can have led him to such a belief? What can have led him to such a belief? Right? Because if they say that only science can provide, all the information about the universe, then what makes him believe that way? Okay, he must surely have been dazzled by the practical results, by the enormous increase in power which has sprung from the particular kind of knowledge scientists have evolved. Because whatever is the evolution of science and the practical returns we are seeing, so we believe, the scientist believes, that more scientific approach, more discoveries will reveal the entire universe. That is his derived conclusion. Without these practical consequences, what would all these scientific theories be? So the practical consequences is what is really becoming a point of appreciation and confidence. An airy bubble, a diversion of otherwise unoccupied mathematicians, a fanciful mirage on a level with Alice in Wonderland. All the scientific theories would be like this, without a practical benefit. What about the theories? Then it would be just like a mirage on a level with Alice in Wonderland. As a result of science, considerable changes have recently occurred in material universe, although by no means more enduring than brass. The monuments to science are nevertheless rather imposing. Acres of masonry, countless machines of startling efficiency, travels speeded up, masses of animals wiped out, illnesses shortened, deaths postponed or accelerated, and so on. This scientific method demonstrably works, though not in the sense that it increases our tranquility. Far from it. All that it does is to increase man's power to control his material environment. And that is something which the yogic method never even attempted. So the goals of scientific community to increase control on these materials was not even attempted by the yogis. They were not focused on it. Scientific technology indeed promises limitless power, unlimited in the sense that by itself it places no limitations, moral or otherwise, on the range of its conquest, on the range of its conquest. Very little notice would presumably be taken of the thought constructions of our scientists if it were not for their impressive practical results. So whatever monuments and constructions have come, if they did not produce practical results, nobody would notice them. Dean Swift's voyage to Laputa would then voice the general attitude, including that of the majority of philosophers. As with yoga, the bare technology is also here clothed in numerous theories, hypotheses, concepts, and philosophical systems capable of considerable disagreement among themselves. But all scientific philosophies agree that scientific research based on the experimental observation of external objects is the key to all worthwhile knowledge and to a rational mode of life. Here, observation of external objects. The data of introspection have given rise to much uneasiness in the scheme of things. The most logical solution seems to be that of the behaviorism, which transforms psychic events into externally observable objects. So, behavioralism. The data of introspection have given rise to much uneasiness in the scheme of things. The most logical solution seems to be that of behaviorism, which transforms psychic events into externally observable objects. So fundamentally what he's saying is the scientific observation is the key to all worthwhile knowledge and to a rational mode of life. But though I were to speak with the tongue of angels, my empiricist friends will continue to shrug their shoulders at the suggestion that yoga and other non-scientific techniques should be taken seriously. As professed humanists, they might be expected to have a greater faith in the depth and breadth of the human spirit and its modalities. As empiricists, they might have a more Catholic notion of experience, and as positivists, a clearer conception of what is and what is not a verifiable fact. So he is suggesting that the scientific community need to adapt these ideas of humanists, empiricists, should have a Catholic, means very generic, acceptable notion of experience. And then positivists should have a clearer conception of what is and what is not a verifiable fact. And even as scientists, they ought to have some doubts as to whether the world of sense-bound consciousness is really the whole of reality. Because scientific community, if as per the author, has restricted for a long time only to the sense-bound consciousness, considered it to be the whole reality. But alas, a staggering hypertrophy of the critical faculties has choked all the other virtues. Staggering hypertrophy of the critical faculties has choked all the other virtues, means overcrowding of the information through these faculties. Contemporary empiricist and positivist philosophers, in their exclusive reliance on scientific knowledge, are guilty of what Whitehead had charitably called a narrow provincialism. Usually unfamiliar with the traditional non-scientific techniques of mankind, they are also, what is worse, quite incurious about them. Means that the scientific community doesn't even have curiosity. Usually unfamiliar with the traditional non-scientific techniques of mankind, they are also, what is worse, quite incurious about them. They are not interested in knowing what are these so-called non-scientific methods. They are not even curious to know. At best, these techniques, if noticed at all, are hastily interpreted as approximations to scientific ones, worked out by ignorant and bungling natives groping in the dark. On the wildest shores of rationalism, it is even rumored that the poet was the primitive physicist. With a shudder we pass on. He says that the scientist even thinks that the pronouncements of the non-scientific poets, let us say, are simply blabbering or talk in ignorance without knowing complete understanding, etc. And he says we don't need to pay attention to it because they're just not right on that point. To judge all human techniques by the amount of their control or power they produce is patently unfair. Other goals may be equally worth striving for, and men wiser than we may deliberately have turned away from the pursuit of measureless power, not as unattainable, but as inherently undesirable. So it's possible that the yogis have not pursued this material wealth or the control on the matter, not because they could not do it, but because they felt it is not desirable even, because it is going to backfire. A graceful submission to the inevitable is not without its attractions either. So you just submit to the nature's way. That is no blame. It has its own attractions. A great deal might be said perhaps for not wanting more power than can be used wisely. And it is much to be feared that the captors of an unwilling universe may end as many lion tamers have ended before them. So those who tame a lion might get killed by a lion. Similarly, if all the people are only against their goal of their scientific pursuit is to control the material world, which is infinite, as we see. In this pursuit, they may really be the losers, like a lion tamer who may get killed. So maybe this is the vision, possibly, that yogis did not go into controlling the universe, but they submitted themselves to the workings of the universe, but simply went into discovering the reality in a non-empirical way, but more of an inward way. Of all the infinite facets of the universe, science-bound philosophers will come to know only those which are disclosed to scientific methods. With their ruthless will for boundless power and their disregard for everything except the presumed convenience of the human race, and they cannot prove or even plausibly suggest that this small fraction of the truth about reality is the one most worth knowing about. So the scientific community may come to know only those scientific facts which can be expressed within our intellectual capabilities, but they would never know the truth which is more important, more profound, and which is not amenable to the scientific method. And it is worth most knowing that this and they cannot prove or even plausibly suggest that this small fraction of the truth about reality is the one most worth knowing about. As for the vast potentialities of the human mind, they will bring out only those which have a survival value in modern technical civilization. Not only is it a mere fraction of the human mind that is being used, but we may well wonder whether it is the most valuable section. Once we consider the ugliness, noisiness, and restlessness of our cities, or the effects which the handling of the machines has on workers, that of scientific tools on scientists. At present, it looks as if this mode of life were sweeping everything before it. At present, it looks as if this mode of life were sweeping everything before it. It also demonstrably sweeps away much that is valuable. So this is how he wants to present his observation that scientific approach alone may not be the be all and a savior for us, and he is saying that in this approach we may sweep away even the valuable. So he wants to propose the yogic method. Here we will stop and continue in our next sessions. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.